All right, hello and welcome to all of you for tuning into today's session that is organized here by the EU SME Center in collaboration with ICE, the Italian Association of Foreign Trade. The topic, get ready for the show, how to prepare for upcoming trade fairs in China. Very relevant for many reasons, not the least also because it's the beginning of the year. It's time to make all the planning for all of our companies and associations. It's 5 o'clock here in the afternoon in Beijing. It's been snowing all day. Can really feel the winter here, but good afternoon to those of you in China and good morning to those of you watching from Europe. And while we're waiting for the last of the participants to join online here, I'd like to once again just say that today's session is a jointly organized one. Collaboration between the EU SME Center together with ICE, the Italian Association of Foreign Trade. And today also to give a few welcome remarks, I'd like to give a warm welcome to Mr. David Doninotti, who is the Secretary General of ICE. So David, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nikolai. As a co-organizer of this event, I wish to welcome all the participants, and in particular the Italian companies that decided to spend a couple of hours with us. I wish to thank the USME Center for organizing this event, in particular Laura Verasco, that is the project manager of Eurochambre, and the experts that will act as speakers today, so Bart and Valentin, and also Nikolai from the Danish Chamber of Commerce in China, that will be the moderator of this meeting. AICE, the Italian Association of Foreign Trade, is a private no-profit business association that represents Italian companies dealing with foreign trade activities, both export and import. We provide a complete assistance to our member companies through a huge range of services covering all the aspects linked to foreign trade operations, from the search of new business opportunities in foreign markets to the technical support in terms of customs, transports, payments, contracts, certifications, and so on, to a massive program of training activities. And the event of today is one of the first events that we organized in 2022. AICE is a partner of the USME Center since 2016. And during these years, we worked closely to organize joint actions aiming to informing Italian SMEs with an interest in the Chinese market. Apart from the webinars and the events, several of our member companies are using the services of the center, in particular in this period, due also to the new laws and rules implemented by China. For example, the new system of registration of food products entering the Chinese market that is into force from the 1st January of this year. China is, of course, a very important market for Italian exporters, and we dedicate several activities to support our members. And the most important of these activities is the organization of the participation of Italian exhibitors at the China International Import Expo that is every year held in Shanghai at the beginning of November. For all these reasons, we decided to organize the today webinar. Although the pandemic is still hardly affecting the possibility to travel and in particular to enter into China, trade fairs are not cancelled and remain a powerful tool to develop new business opportunities. Today, our speakers will give us practical information and suggestions on how to prepare for a trade fair in China, also in COVID-19 times. And they will give us also some ideas on how to protect our intellectual property at trade fairs, since this is another very important issue when a company starts doing business with Chinese partners. So thank you very much to all of you, and I hope this morning can be useful and productive. And I give the floor to Nicolai in order to manage the webinar. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, David, for the remarks. And I think you hit the nail on the head. COVID, of course, is still happening, and it's hard to travel back and forth from China, but that's not to say that the trade fairs will not be relevant for the organizations. So whether or not you're watching from Europe or whether or not you are staffers watching from China, today's topic will definitely be hopefully very relevant for you. So we're also very happy today to have two expert speakers that you already mentioned, Mr. Bart Horsten, who is the Managing Director of Horsten International, and also Mr. Valentin Delacourt, who's the Intellectual Property Partner at Daily Wolf. Before we get into that, I would like to give all of you here just a brief introduction to the EU SME Center in general, because the EU SME Center is doing a lot of things. What is it and how can the companies get a benefit out of it? Well, that is what we'll get to now. So if you'll indulge me for just a second, the EU SME Center is an EU Commission funded project that has been operating since 2010. So a little bit over 10 years now. And the purpose is to help European SMEs get ready for China and to do business in the Chinese market. What are the benefits? What are the challenges? We're trying to give a very objective, as much as we can, perspective on business in China. Right now, the EU SME Center is operating in its third phase, which took place from October in 2022. Seems like a long time ago now, and will continue until March of this year, 2022. So still a few months left. The EU SME Center helps prepare the European SMEs to do business in China by providing, as I said, a range of different kinds of value that can be information, advice, training, as is what we're doing today, but also other support services that I will elaborate on very briefly soon. The EU SME Center is also an official member of the EEN, that's the Enterprise Europe Network. And so far, the EU SME Center has partnered with over 270 government agencies and business support organizations, such as David's organization he introduced just before, both in Europe, but also here in China. In the third phase here, we have an office in China, boots on the ground here in Beijing, China's capital. The third phase is implemented by 4 chambers of commerce and 1 business council, those 5 being the Italian Chamber of Commerce, which is the lead of the third phase here, the China-Britain Business Council, the Danish Chamber of Commerce in China, which is where I'm working with when I'm not doing EU SME projects, and the Euro Chambers, and also finally the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China. So what are the different services that the EU SME Center can provide for European companies? Well, roughly it can be divided into 4 different areas. The first one, knowledge center. Second one, advice center, training center, and finally an advocacy platform for SMEs. I'll go through them very briefly. The first one, the knowledge center. Well, that means that the EU SME Center shares a lot of information completely free of charge. So far, we have almost 200 market reports and guidelines and case studies available to download on the EU SME website. So just go on there and you can find the aspect or the area, the sector that could be interesting for you, and you can read up-to-date reports on it. Another aspect of the Knowledge Center is that we have created in 2021 the self-diagnosis tool, which is quite a comprehensive online quiz, really, where you can take the quiz, you can answer the questions, and then based on your question, the quiz will give you a customized answer, basically a self-assessment as to how ready you may be for China. Maybe it can give you some inspiration for some aspects that you could get benefit from looking a little bit more into. The third aspect of the Advice Center is that we also have the Ask the Expert function on our website. The Ask the Expert function is available, it's free, and you can ask just about anything about doing business in China, and then the experts from the EU SME Center will do their best to answer your question within 3 working days. So we really like to stress you to use the Ask the Expert function if you have any questions in general about doing business in China. If you have any questions about today's topic, then we of course encourage you to use the Q&A function down in the bottom here of Zoom, so that you can ask these questions directly to today's two experts. But if you have any questions at a later stage, or you forget to ask today, you can use the Ask the Expert function on the website. The second aspect is that the EU SME Center is functioning as a training center, and that is of course what we are doing today here online with today's topic. Sometimes we have them on site, offline in both Europe and in China. Sometimes we have them online, as is the case of today. Usually we like to do them hybrid, so both at the same time if possible. And the topics that we cover is very broad and very different. If you have any suggestions for topics for us to cover in the future, please let us know, any of our staffers. Third one is that we operate as an advocacy platform. That means that we are setting up meetings both in Europe with stakeholders and in China with stakeholders. We try to share on regulation changes and information such as that to the European SMEs looking to do business in China. The fourth and final one is that we, well, actually what I'd like to share here is just the next slate of events that we have here. The next slate of events, you can find the next 6 events here, but you can find the full overview on our website, that is the EU SME Center. So that website is always the most up-to-date place to see which kind of events we are doing, both in China and in Europe. Now, the final thing that I'd just like to say once again, before we welcome our expert speakers to talk about today's topic, is that we are including a Q&A session for today. How does it work? Well, it works very easily. You just click the Q&A button down in the bottom bar here of Zoom, and then you can answer your question. Well, you can ask your question anonymously in the Q&A function, because then we will get them to the speakers after the presentation has concluded. So that's how we will be doing it. Another thing, after today's session is over, we will be sharing a link to today's session on YouTube, and also we'll be sending you the slides. And finally, we will also be sending you a feedback survey that we very much hope that you would take 1 minute to help us answer the feedback and tell us how we can improve. If there's any topics you would like to learn more about in the future, that is very greatly appreciated. Even if there's something we can do better, we would love to hear your feedback so we can improve in the future. Now, with all of that out of the way, I will not say too much more. I think I will leave the floor to our expert speakers of today. The first speaker will be Mr. Bart Horsten. He's the Managing Director of Horsten International. And Bart, he is no stranger to China. He's been in China for, traveled back and forth over 100 times, lived in China for a longer period of time. But Bart, I think I will leave it to you as well to give today's audience more background as to what you're doing. So Bart.
Yes, good afternoon to everybody in China. Good morning to my European citizens, co-citizens. I'm calling you from Belgium, so a small town near Antwerp. And thank you very much for the EU SME Center and IDSE for giving me the chance to talk about participating in trade fairs in China. So let me first quickly introduce myself. So thank you for the introduction by David and Nikolai, but indeed I have been doing business in China for many, many years, usually based in Europe, traveling to China on a regular basis. Unfortunately, of course, in the past 2 years, this has not been the case. I have my own company. It was actually settled by my father, but then now today we are still a family company with myself and 2 brothers, and altogether 13 people, of which the biggest majority based in China. Apart from traditional consulting services about strategy and operations, we also started working in e-commerce and social media. But without further ado, I will go back to the agenda of today. So these are the topics we will discuss. The impact of COVID, of course, we need to talk about it. Then I will highlight some interesting trade fairs which will be taking place this year. I've looked at the participants list, and I selected some sectors which are interesting for you guys. Then I'll give you some practical tips how to participate in trade fairs, or the options you have to participate in trade fairs in China during this COVID period. then practical tips before, after, and during the exhibition. And finally, I will talk about some case studies. So first, the impact of COVID on the trade fair participation in China. Obviously, as probably most of you know, China is a huge country, but very limited number of COVID cases. These are the official numbers from yesterday, so it's quite accurate. Oh, well, it's quite up to date, I would say. You can always question whether or not all of it is absolutely accurate, but anyway, these are the official numbers. So you can see that, well, in a country of 1.4 billion people, only about, well, less than 5,000 people died since the beginning of COVID outbreak. So it's really about 2 years now. So it's quite amazing how China managed to keep COVID outside the country compared to European countries or cities, or even my village. There are more confirmed cases, I think, than in a big town in China. So today there are 27 high-risk areas in China. So basically, this could be or a complete city or a certain district of a city. And so depending on the evolution, people then can go back, can leave their apartments or have to stay inside their apartments and maybe can go out for, say, 2 hours every 2 days and only one person of the family. So it's quite strict. And until today, the Chinese government is maintaining a zero tolerance policy. Yeah? So this means that basically, even if it's just like 2 or 5 cases, for example, I think in Shanghai, I looked at it in particular. I think yesterday there were 15 cases in Shanghai, 5 cases in Beijing. Sometimes even that small amount of cases is enough to close down a whole building or a community or district or even the whole city. Yeah? So it's quite strict. Like I said, due to this very stringent policy, a lot of Chinese cities or part of cities are in complete lockdown. And well, I'm sure you all know, soon we will have a Chinese New Year holiday, a lot of people traveling inside China, and the Beijing Winter Olympics coming up soon. So it can be expected that not only until after the Winter Olympics, but even also later this year, and possibly even the whole year of 2022, China will maintain this strict policy. So traveling to China is still possible, but definitely you need a lot of, let's say, energy to go through the documentation and testing. And of course, once you get your visa, if you get your visa, also before, during, and after, there's a lot of things to do. And of course, not to forget that you have to go through at least 2, sometimes even more weeks of quarantine in a hotel in China. So really locked inside the hotel room. So I wish you a lot of good luck when you decide to go to China. So like I said, it is possible, but for, let's say, regular business travelers, so people with no working visa in China or no family or no diplomat status, it is quite hard to go to China. So you might think, what's going on with trade fairs? And like David mentioned in the beginning, so definitely trade fairs are taking place in China. So despite the situation in the rest of the world and the difficulties for the international traveling, basically you could say that the trade fair schedule is relatively normal. I have to admit that sometimes, like I said, if in a certain district there's a new outbreak, then it can be the reason to cancel exhibitions. So you always need to be flexible. For example, well, we've had a customer participating in a trade fair in November, but it was canceled just 2 weeks before. So now it's been rescheduled to August. So you really need to be flexible, and so always take into account that exhibitions may be canceled. But also when traveling to China, or even people, so yeah, you see some pictures there taken from exhibitions in 2021. So people usually have mouth masks. So a lot of also QR codes checking. There's a green code to yellow or red code. So this is quite well organized in China. And people, I think, already used to this system. So basically, within China, business travel and working is going on relatively normal. But of course, I've also had stories where, for example, a certain person will go into an office building or working in an office building in Beijing or in any other place in China. Then suddenly there is a confirmed case inside the building. So they basically lock down the whole building for 48 hours. And so a lot of my colleagues, when they go to the office, they make sure to have some spare clothing or some toiletry with them, so that in case they get locked down for 48 hours, at least they can survive those 48 hours. So you always need to be taking into account that possibly there will be some restrictions from one day to the other, or from 1 hour to the next. So like I said, I have here some sectors. I highlighted a few interesting trade fairs. Probably it's not complete, so forgive me. But at least I think it's worthwhile for you to check. So you will find websites of all these different exhibitions. So first, food and beverages. So basically, I could recommend 3: CL, FHC, and Chengdu Food and Drinks Fair. I think the third one is even the oldest one. So it's already a long tradition. And Chengdu, of course, is also a very interesting place to do business. It's in the middle of China, in the Sichuan province, but a very dynamic environment, and also I think interesting fair to go to, although probably it's more, let's say, more domestic. And so it's not as international as CL and FHC, but I definitely advise you to check the website and the dates, because like I said, due to unexpected cases, there may be a change of schedule, but basically these are the dates you see there. These are the dates that these exhibitions will be planned this year. Packaging and machinery, there's also quite a number of exhibitions. One in Guangzhou in March, one in Shenzhen in April. Again, depending on your business or your activity, one or the other may be more interesting. ProPack and SWAP, or Shanghai World of Packing, is also 2 interesting exhibitions held in June and August. In fact, the second one over there, this was the one where my customer was planning to go to participate in November last year, but it has been postponed to August 2022. So this is one of the exhibitions that have changed, because usually this exhibition is held every 2 years and usually in November. So this year it will be held in August. Medical devices, components, also here, please check the dates and websites, so then you can have a look whether or not any of those is interesting for you. In case you have any particular questions about any of these exhibitions, please do not hesitate. Contact the EU SME Center or me directly, so that we can check for you whether or not this is more or less interesting for your particular company. You also notice that a lot of these exhibitions are held in Shanghai. Well, not only, but Shanghai is definitely the place to be as far as trade fairs is concerned. So they have 2 very beautiful big exhibition spaces, one in the east of town and one in the west of town. And so a lot of exhibitions are held actually in Shanghai. Also these textiles and non-woven exhibitions, both of them held in Shanghai. China Plus, so more focusing on plastics and rubber products, also held in Shanghai in April. Automotive, 4, all of them in Shanghai again. So you see, it's really depending on which of these sectors or these activities you're interested in. Definitely worthwhile to take a look, and definitely then Shanghai will be the place to go to. In pharmaceuticals and chemicals, some of these may sound familiar. So like, for example, CPHI is actually an international exhibition, which is not only held in China, but also in Europe and US, and I think also in Middle East every year. So some of these are also organized by foreigners or foreign organizations. Some are more domestically organized, or it can also be in a joint venture. Then finally, some all-round exhibitions. So I'm sure most of you have heard about the Canton Fair. So Canton, or Guangdong in Chinese, or in Mandarin Chinese. So we held in Guangzhou, even twice a year. So already for, I don't know how many years, so maybe 100 a year. So quite a long time. This is one of the oldest and largest trade fairs in China, but focusing mostly on export. So export from China to the West. So if ever you are looking for suppliers in China, you can definitely also go to this exhibition, because there you'll find a lot of different suppliers. Please note, make sure to go to the right phase, because as you see, there's 3 phases. So one in April, which the date still needs to be confirmed. So I know that also last year, for example, they had a virtual exhibition. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So because they also need to be very flexible, so the dates are still to be confirmed. So I advise you to check the website on a regular basis. The final one there at the bottom is the China International Import Expo, or also called CIIE. David briefly mentioned it in the very beginning in his introduction. This one will be held in Shanghai from 5 to 10 November. And I wanted to briefly give a little bit more introduction about this one. This is the only one I talk about a little bit more. As you see, this is an exhibition which is in fact only held since 2018. And in fact, it has been planned as a import fair in comparison with the export fair, the Canton Fair. So like I said, already for many, many years, you have the Canton Fair. So basically positioning China as an export country, which was the case for many, many years. Most of us in Europe, when we go to China in the let's say the 80s, the 90s, or the years 2000, usually it was to buy products or to build a factory there, because it was a low-cost country. So China was mostly known as the factory of the world, and exporting a lot of their products. The Chinese president, Xi Jinping, he wanted to promote China also more as an import company. So as an equivalent to the Canton Fair, now he's decided to set up the CIIE. So this one is held only once a year, always in November. And of course, as probably you know, if Xi Jinping makes a decision, or if Xi Jinping pushes forward a certain policy, then definitely it will be rolled out all over China. So it's a quite important and very, very big exhibition. I have to admit, it needed some time to really get started. So the first year I was there myself. I was there actually in 2018 and 2019. The first year, I have to admit, it was a little bit too much, let's say, propaganda style exhibition. So I was there, and it was a huge amount of people, but from all different provinces coming to Shanghai to be there. So a lot of delegations, also a lot of state-owned companies or official delegations were supposed to go there to visit the exhibition. And I've heard some companies complaining that they were signing contracts, but then they never got a copy of the signed contract. So basically it was about reaching high numbers for the sake of the president, but then with probably a little bit less real outcome. So like I said, more propaganda. But I have to admit that since then, it has improved a lot. And so I was there in 2019. It was already much better. And I'm sure now, I have not been able to be there in the past 2 years, but I learned from some companies that participated that actually it's becoming more and more interesting. So if you are looking for, so here you see a picture which I took myself in 2018. This was on the subway, on the way to from the subway station to the exhibition. So if you consider this exhibition, although it's a multi-sector exhibition, so it's different sectors, definitely I think it's worthwhile to consider. Also because I think David mentioned that a lot of say or countries, or I think itself also, or chambers of commerce, etc., or any other governmental institution. They have these kind of pavilions. So definitely worthwhile to consider. I was a little bit surprised when I went there, because so when you want to apply for a ticket to this exhibition, you cannot just go there. You need to submit your passport and your picture a few weeks in advance, and then they will check your profile, and then you will receive a confirmation. And so then once you go there, you need to go through some waiting line, and then suddenly my picture appeared. So it's they use face recognition, so they know you are there. Here's a picture of the Belgian pavilion with the Smurfs, very famous Smurfs. It's also a Belgian tradition. Here's the Swiss pavilion. So definitely worthwhile to consider, because like I said, if in China something has great attention from the top officials from China, then it has to be important. So like I said, often a lot of trade delegations from the provinces and autonomous regions visit this exhibition. And so often these are companies which do not necessarily visit, let's say, the more professional exhibitions. I mean, exhibitions which are not supported by the top government officials. So definitely, I've had a few companies that signed really big contracts with big players in China. So if you don't have a distributor in China yet, CIE could definitely be an interesting exhibition to go to as the first exhibition in China. Also because, like I said, a lot of countries have their pavilions, so you can use the exposure and the reputation of the country pavilion to talk to Chinese companies or potential partners. So so definitely it still needs some development, this exhibition, because like I said, it's only there for a few years, but definitely it has a lot of potential, and I think it could become a very significant exhibition. Do you need to be there 2 times or 3 times? Maybe not. So what I would, again, it depends on your company, it depends on the sector, but it could be interesting to consider that going there as a first exhibition to China. But then once you found your distributor, the next exhibition you go to, or the next exhibition you participate, may then be a sector-specific exhibition. But again, this you can decide yourself. Okay. It's nice to have exhibitions in China, but then if you cannot go there yourself, how do you participate? So I've tried to highlight a few possibilities or a few options in this presentation. So you see there, of course, the first one on the left, if you have your own office in China, then basically it's easier. You will not be able to travel there yourself, possibly, but you can send your colleagues, foreign or Chinese colleagues based in China, to represent your company at the booth. So that's the easy part. I will talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. Now I will highlight the other 4. So you can also work with your agent or distributor in China to set up the booth and represent your company on the exhibition. You can work with a third-party service provider. There's also government agencies or chambers of commerce who offer the opportunity to participate in an exhibition in China. It has some advantages and disadvantages. I'll talk about it in a minute. And of course, like I said, today, a lot of these exhibitions, or I think most of them, also have some possibilities to have a virtual exhibition or to have online meetings with potential partners during the exhibition. So they have some like a matching platforms, etc., etc. So I'll talk about that. So working with agents and distributors, of course, I guess you know the difference between an agent and a distributor. An agent basically takes commissions. So that means that you sell your product or your equipment or technology to a customer in China, introduced by the agent, and the agent will get a commission. A distributor, of course, they will buy your product or equipment, and then they will sell it. So they take a margin. That's the way they make money. So I will not differentiate between the two, but well, definitely if you ask your agent or distributor to organize the exhibition for you, well, definitely they know the market. They have Chinese speaking staff, so definitely they could, I think, do a good job to help you to get some exposure in China. And of course, after the exhibition is over, they can help you to do the follow-up. So I think it could be an efficient way, or maybe even the most efficient one, while you're not able to travel yourself. However, more and more important, and even today then with COVID, it is even more important to make sure that you know your Chinese partner, because I've seen so many examples of companies signing contract with distributors or agents or partners in China, which they don't really know well enough. So then maybe in the beginning, they work together well, but then soon problems start, and then there is a lot of miscommunication and frustration with well, in the end, stopped cooperation, or even worse, I don't know, big problems happening. So it's even more important today to make sure to know your Chinese partner. And of course, obviously, since you are not there yourself, you know your product better than anybody. So it's important that you make sure that your Chinese partner knows your product. So you really need to take a lot of time to do the training. If you have any Chinese speaking people in your company here in Europe, definitely ask them to help and translate in Chinese. So the communication and the training before the exhibition is extremely important. Another challenge is the information sharing. So traditionally, working with distributors or agents in China, they like to keep their data a little bit confidential. So of course, you have a distribution agreement in place. Well, I hope you should have. Of course, then there should be some conditions or obligations for your distributor to share information about the market to you, so that at least you know who is your final customer. If it's an agent, like I said, usually you will sell directly to the final customer. For example, in B2B business, this is common practice. But if you're in consumer products like food or any other consumer products, often you work with distributors. They have their customers, but often you don't really know who they're selling to, what's their pricing or marketing positioning. So it's important that you ask your distributor to share this kind of information or this data from the market, because it's crucial for you to better understand the market. And finally, of course, I'm sure Valentin will talk about that afterwards. Make sure that you have your intellectual properties well protected. I would even say more today, all of you participating. So that's good news. But then that means that you have some plans to go to China, or maybe you are already in China. So in fact, that means that you should start today to look at your intellectual properties and trademarks in China, because in fact, you should even, before you send any samples or any information or documentation to China, you should already start protecting your trademark. But Valentin will talk about that later on. So the third option actually was working with third-party service providers. Clearly, these are consultants or other service providers that can help you. They have an office in China. They have people in China, like we do. And of course, you can talk to them. They understand what you're looking for. Of course, you need to have a good discussion and brainstorming session and training, so that they know what they're talking about. But usually you will have more control over the exhibition strategy and the marketing strategy afterwards. And well, usually this service provider will also have Chinese staff that can represent you on the exhibition. Disadvantage, of course, you need to pay them. So, well, there's also different payment schedules, I guess, or cost schedules. Often there is some traveling and hotel to be done. So this is also an extra cost. Obviously, if you go to China yourself, you also need to incur a lot of traveling costs. So basically, in the end, it will still be a little bit cheaper probably than if you go there by yourself with a whole team. But of course, this is not your own people. So you really need to spend a lot of time to train them. What we've also seen is that sometimes these service providers, okay, they will maybe send one person, let's say more senior, skilled person, but often they also use like students or let's say less experienced people. So make sure that that also the people they send to the booth are qualified. So you need to ask them to send the resumes or at least some background information about the people on the personnel on the booth, so that you can also judge whether or not they are suitable. And of course, you need to make clear arrangements about what's next. So after the exhibition is over, they need to send you the report, they need to share all the information with you, and then you need to agree on how to cooperate after the exhibition and how to do the follow-up. So very important to plan this in advance. Like I said, a very interesting way is also to work with government agencies and chambers of commerce. For example, if I look at the Belgium situation, so we've had, of course, we've also have representations of government representations in China, and in the past, of course, they would share like data from the market and some potential distributors or importers with you, and then you need to do the work yourself. Also going to exhibitions yourself. They can maybe help you to find some translators, but basically they will not help you with operation. In Belgium, recently we've seen that the government institutions have a little bit changed their scope of work due to COVID, and now they also help companies from your country to represent. Of course, like I said, it's a nice way to at least be present at an exhibition. So also you can benefit from this country pavilion reputation. So if your company is on this pavilion, maybe it gives a little bit more credibility to the Chinese visitors. On the other hand, of course, we see that mostly then it's just like a few flyers or brochures. Often you cannot even send samples. Sometimes you can, so it depends. So I wouldn't say much to be expected, but because in the end, again, the people from the government agencies or chamber of commerce, of course, they do their best, but they also don't know your product or your company very well. So also they need training, but of course they are very busy, so they may not have the time to really get into the details of your products. So it's important that at least you understand that it's maybe also not that efficient in the end. And of course, again, you need to consider how to do follow-up after the exhibition. I also mentioned this virtual or online exhibition. Well, this is definitely also an interesting way, because in this way you can still meet with potential customers or potential partners in China in person, of course, through video call. Of course, you know your product very well, so no training is needed there. But on the other hand, we've seen at a few cases where we've had these virtual exhibitions, and then there was indeed a foreign company talking to a Chinese potential customer in English, of course, because, well, mostly the foreign person will not be able to speak Chinese. And a lot of miscommunication happened because although the Chinese counterpart did understand English, still there was a lot of misunderstanding. So in the end, probably the message does not always come across. So it's also there, it's important that you have some information about your company or your products in Chinese available, or you even have a Chinese person who is able to communicate with the potential customer in Chinese language. And of course, although it's a face-to-face meeting through video, still it's not really the same as meeting a person in China in person. So because, you know, according to the Chinese culture and business culture, it's important to have built a trust and make friends with your business partners. And how can you do this from a distance? So that's, of course, always a disadvantage, not only for this type of participation, but also for the others. So that's the biggest, I think one of the biggest frustrations I have is that although I have a big network in China, a lot of friends in China, I've not seen them face to face for 2 years. And yeah, this is, you see that you lose a little bit this chance to build a relationship and build the trust between the parties, which is still a very important part of doing business in China. Again, follow-up is also a challenge in this option. So then you may ask yourself, does it make sense in the first place to participate in a trade fair in China, maybe we just need to skip it and just plan it in 2023. To be honest, I would still say yes. It is still a good idea to participate in trade fairs in China, because what we have seen, for example, although maybe some exhibitions have been postponed or cancelled, in any case, we do see less foreign companies participating at exhibitions in China. But of course, then it's a chance for you, if you are there and you find a solution, to participate with working with your agent or third party or any other way to participate. Then at least you are there. Yes, it's not perfect, so it's always better that you go there yourself. So don't expect any miracles. Probably the efficiency or the outcome of the exhibition will be less than if you would be there yourself, because nobody can replace you. You know your product or company or equipment better than anybody else. But still, I think it's a chance that you get much more exposure, because the few companies that go there get a lot more attention. So definitely worthwhile, at least to consider it. So then here are some practical tips how to prepare for trade fairs and how to participate. So we'll look at three parts: before, during, and after the exhibition. So like I said a few slides before, if you plan to go to an exhibition, well, in fact, it's not only going to an exhibition. Basically, like I said a couple of minutes ago, no matter if you are, whatever you are doing or planning to do in China, if you have the plan, you should start considering registering your trademark to start with, and not even your foreign trademark in China, but you may even consider registering also a Chinese trademark. So finding a Chinese name and registering it also in your name. Well, we have some experience with that, but I'll leave Valentin to talk about that. Then, very important, it's not different from participating in any other international exhibition, but you should ask yourself, why do I want to participate in an exhibition? Like I said, if you go to CIIE, probably you will not have a distributor yet. So then your objective for this exhibition may be to find distributors. You may already have a distributor, so then you can ask your distributor or distributors, because it's also possible that you have multiple distributors in China. You can ask them to come to the booth and represent you. And if, for example, you have a distributor for north of China, then when a visitor comes to the booth, coming from Beijing or Shandong province or any other northern place, then you can introduce them to the distributor for Beijing or for this north area. And in this way, increase sales. So it can also be that just you want to promote your brand and company image. There may be other objectives. It may also be worthwhile to participate in an exhibition so that you can find potential partners or joint venture partners or any other technological partners for cooperation or R&D cooperation. So you always need to consider what is the objective of the exhibition and what do I want to achieve? Because if it is only there to increase sales, basically maybe you need to send other type of people to attend the exhibition. If there's other objectives, you may need to send other people. And then, is it the right time to participate in a trade fair in China? So what I want to say with that is that, again, based on my experience, if there would be no COVID, my general recommendation would be like this. Before you participate in an exhibition, it's always better to first go there yourself. For example, if you're in the food business, it may be worthwhile to go to FHC in November without having your own booth there. So then you will get a feel of how the exhibition is, maybe already meet some people, make some appointments, talk to some potential partners or distributors, maybe look at the competition. So get a feel of the market. Also do a lot of store checks when you go there. So because while you're in Shanghai or in any other place in China, it's definitely also worthwhile to go into the market and visit supermarkets or other places where your products are sold, or those of your competitors, so that it also helps you to understand the market, the prices, the packaging, the tastes, so etc. of your competitors, which will enable you to better prepare for your participation the following year, of course. And then the following year you may already have a distributor, so then it's definitely more efficient to participate in an exhibition when you already have a distributor, because at some exhibitions in China, often when you don't have a distributor yet or a partner in China yet, often people come to your booth and they ask you, your product is interesting, or your equipment is interesting, do you have a distributor in China? And then if you have to say no, then often they lose interest, because often you will find people visiting your booth that are not able to import directly, or not willing to do it, not in big quantities, for example. So then they prefer to work with a distributor or an importer which has already imported a product, so that they can buy from this importer. Or they want to become a sub-distributor because they are from, I don't know, a place somewhere in the inland of China, and they have no ambitions to become your exclusive distributor for China, but they do have some sales channels in the west of China, and they want to become your sub-distributor. So that's why I say, in normal times, I would always recommend to my customers, before you participate, maybe it's better first to have a look and see whether this exhibition is indeed the one you need to go to. And then the next year you can participate. Again, today the situation is a little bit different, so you cannot go there, or it's very difficult to just go there and travel and visit an exhibition. So of course, today you need to go there and participate in an exhibition as an exhibitor, because otherwise you will not be able to get any feeling of the market, or in the end you decide not to go there this year. But I already mentioned it previously. I still think there's definitely good arguments for you to consider participating in a trade fair in China still this year. Okay, so let's assume we are planning to participate in an exhibition. So first, you need to find out which exhibition is the most interesting one. Like I said, often your government agency or any other company or organization of your country may have a pavilion on any of those exhibitions. So it may be worthwhile also from a cost point of view to participate in this pavilion first. And also, if your country institution is going there, it means it's a good exhibition. So it definitely also helps you to make the right selection. You need to find out about your market. So who is your target customer? Do you know the market actually? Is there a market for your product or your equipment in the first place? I'll talk about that in the next slide very briefly. Make sure you have the right marketing materials. It can be brochure or any other information. I definitely need to talk about WeChat. So WeChat is the communication channel in China. It's like, let's say, WhatsApp, Facebook, Messenger, and well, everything combined. It's a very, very unique tool. It's quite different from the social media apps we have in the Western world. But definitely you need it when you go to China. So I advise you definitely to install this app before you go. So a WeChat ID, so that means you have your personal ID. And then if you meet somebody, often, of course, you will share your name card. But nowadays in China, it's less and less name cards, but it's more and more people ask your WeChat ID and they want to scan your code, your QR code, and then become your contact or your friend. And so then this way you can keep in touch with this potential partner. Often you don't even know their email addresses and they only send you WeChat messages. And so take into account that while traveling to China or communicating with somebody in China, less and less email is used and more they use WeChat. So that's why also, if people ask me, should we have a Chinese website or what should we have? Apart from having a flyer, it should be in Chinese too. I didn't mention that yet. but should we also prepare like a Chinese website or some? I often advise my customers, instead of having a website in the Chinese language, which may not be accessible within China, because some foreign websites are blocked, or at least less easily accessible if you are inside China due to this great firewall of China, as they call it. So you may spend money to have your website translated into Chinese, but then in the end, in China, your potential customer may not be able to read it or to open it in the first place. So that's why I often advise my customers, why don't you consider a WeChat official account, which is like a kind of a, let's say, a Facebook page style page. So it's a official account. It has a menu and sub menu, and so you can post newsletters or any articles there on this website, on this WeChat account, and in this way keep in touch with your followers or your friends or business partners. So definitely try to have information in Chinese, written or online form. In any case, you want your Chinese potential partners or customers to understand your product or know your company, and it should be in Chinese, because I can tell you, if you go to an exhibition in China, you can expect, even if it's in Shanghai, you can expect that probably 80% of the people you meet are not able to speak English, or at least do not feel comfortable to speak English. So you need information in Chinese. You need also Chinese speaking staff. That's a given fact. So I've experienced it myself many times. Of course, then I already mentioned that you can invite prospective clients if you have them already. If not, of course, then you maybe need to ask your service provider or your agent or distributor that, of course, they can also invite their network. I already mentioned that the qualification of the personnel at the booth is extremely important. So you need to make sure that they have the right qualifications, that they are trained enough, and they understand the product, and they understand what you want to, what is the objective of the exhibition. Product samples can be sent to China. I don't know if you're familiar with the ATA Carnet. Basically, this means that you can send samples to China with no import duties, because it's only for the exhibition. But then after the exhibitions, these products need to be sent back to the home country. So in this way, you do not have to go through the traditional import clearance, customs clearance, because it's only for exhibition purposes. You can send your products back and forth to China in a relatively fast and easy way. Some documents need to be filled out. You can check with your Chamber of Commerce. Of course, if the government agency, at least I know in Belgium, if a government agency has a pavilion, a country pavilion in any of these exhibitions, sometimes you can also get subsidies, even for the traveling. Sometimes it's also subsidized, so definitely need to check on that. And of course, you always need to have a post-fair plan, because it's good to prepare well, but in the end, you will spend money, you will spend time to go to the exhibition, to participate in the exhibition. Now with COVID, you need to also indeed spend more time for training and making sure that you bring your message across from a distance. So that means also that if you do not have any plan for the strategy afterwards, basically all your efforts and all your money is wasted. So it's extremely important to have a post-fair marketing strategy. I mentioned briefly in the previous slide, make sure you know the market. Unfortunately, we do not have the time today to go in too much detail, but there I can only advise you, although you cannot travel to China, you should at least do some kind of market investigation. In fact, a lot of free information is available. I talk to many customers who don't really know what's available. Of course, like Nikolai mentioned, the EU SME Center has also a lot of information available, guidelines, reports, big database. So definitely, you can also ask advice free of charge to any of the experts. But a lot of information is also available online. I mean, you can search for about trademarks, standards, import duties, taxes, regulations. You can have Chinese sources, of course. If you have Chinese speaking staff, a lot of information is actually available about your products, your sector in China. So you can, of course, also buy reports. You can ask service provider or consultant to do your market research. Of course, that may also be worthwhile to do, but don't forget that there's also a lot of information available free of charge. And if you are able to travel to China, don't forget to do the on-the-ground footwork, because often this is also forgotten or ignored. And in fact, again, you don't even need to go to China to ask your customers face to face about their feedback. I mean, there's also industry experts or other companies that have experience in China that can also give you a lot of advice or tips, or bring you into touch with somebody else, because that's the way it works in China. They have relationships, and then people can introduce you to somebody else, and then in this way you can also get a lot of information. And basically, also, if you talk to a potential distributor, or if you talk to a potential partner, I always said to my customers, just ask them, because you will be surprised if they are willing to work with you. You will be surprised how much information they are willing to share with you. If they don't want to share it, it means maybe they're not serious partners. Okay, so we are well prepared. Now it's time to participate in the exhibition. Again, like I said before, this is assuming that you or somebody else appointed by you can go there in person. So make sure that you go there one day in advance, because there's always possibly issues with the booth or the setup of the booth. So making sure that you double check and check everything, and make sure that the people are well informed, the staff on the booth, that they know what's expected. Maybe you need to have like a plan for people that can take also some break once in a while, because if you have only 1 or 2 people at the booth, of course, it can be extremely intense to spend 3 or 4 days at the booth. So you need to also give them some time to relax or to take a break. So it's better to have maybe 2 or 3 people, or more than 2 at least, to represent your company. Leave your Western culture behind. Always smile, show respect to its visitor. Basically, this means that dealing with Chinese visitors can be, or on an exhibition, can be quite a different experience than you're used to in Europe or in any other Western country. Also because you work with translators often. I've had one example of a Belgian guy, an export manager, going to China. So he was the only foreigner at the booth, and there were 2 or 3 Chinese people helping him on the exhibition. And of course, on the first day, there was a person coming to the exhibition, to the booth, and asking a certain question, and then the translator would do the translation. Then this export manager will talk in English, answer the question, and then the answer is translated by the translator. Then another question comes, and so back and forth. This is the way it goes. But then the longer the exhibition takes, the more, of course, the personnel at the booth will already know what to answer. So if another visitor comes asking the same question, often it's no need to translate into English. So the foreign guy is standing there just waiting and looking around, but not being able to talk about it, because he is just looking at the translator and the visitor to the booth having a conversation in Chinese, and we cannot follow what's going on. And I've had this export manager becoming very frustrated, because even becoming angry to the translator. Why are you not translating? Because you were talking for 5 minutes and now you translate in 20 seconds. How come you didn't translate the whole story? So this is a typical kind of frustrations or things happening on a booth. So make sure that you understand that a lot of information is indeed, or communication is done in Chinese. And or you may need to learn some words in Chinese, or at least you need to adapt, and don't become angry, or always keep respect to each visitor, or even if they steal away your products, because that also happens in China. So you should never leave your booth unattended. Very important. Make sure you have a kind of an inquiry form. I'm sure that when you go to exhibitions in other countries, you also have this form where you can add the name card or any other relevant information about the company, the reason for the visit, the interest, or any other information about the discussion you had with this potential visitor, which allows you, of course, to do a more efficient follow-up. While you are at the exhibition, there's a lot of people passing by. If you have certain products that you want to have tested, it's a unique chance. Of course, again, you can work with a service provider or a market research company to make you a very expensive consumer report or market research. But in fact, while you are there, you have some products there. You can also do some consumer tests at the exhibition yourself. And pay your own hotel. This means actually that often you have especially if you do not have a distributor yet or a partner in China, often they would offer you to pay for your expenses. But of course, then they will drive you around, but basically they hijack you. So you are not free to go anywhere. And basically they just want to push you to work with them. So that's better that you keep some independence, that you plan your own trip in China, so that you can not only meet with this particular distributor, but you can also meet with others. Because if he or she will drive you around town the whole week, then he or she will also know who else you are visiting or talking to. So it's always better to keep the kind of independence and pay for your own expenses. Then, like I said, WeChat, extremely important. So make sure that you have a WeChat account. If you do not have an official account, at least you make sure that you have a personal WeChat ID so that you can exchange QR codes and become WeChat friends, so that later when you send them messages, you can also keep in touch through WeChat. If you have a nice gift to share, it's always nice to bring some typical gifts. It does not have to be expensive, as long as it's something typical of your country. While you're there, like I said, traveling to China or participating in an exhibition can be an expensive venture. So while you're there, why not spend a few days longer to visit some stores or also visit some other cities or talk to potential customers? You should take the time to build relationships and invite your counterparts or customers for lunch or dinner. Even if you're very, very tired and somebody invites you to have a dinner, it's always nice to accept it, although you're very tired, because you will be surprised how it may be helpful to build a relationship, to become a better friend and have better business afterwards. It still works in China, although of course nowadays China is, let's say, more a modern country than it used to be. Still, relationships and building trust is still a very important part of doing business in China. And of course, don't have any false expectations or definitely don't expect any quick wins. I would even sometimes recommend if you have a visitor to your booth coming to you and say, "Oh, your product is fantastic. I want to be your distributor and I can sell you 10 containers in the first year." I wouldn't expect this is true. So it's better that you double check first. Of course, it's nice if you come back from the exhibition and you can tell to your boss, "Oh, I have an order for 10 containers," but the chances are big that maybe the first year will be 10 containers, but then if he doesn't sell, he will basically burn your brand before you know it, and the next year maybe no containers ever. So definitely it's better to first double check who you're talking to and what their real ambitions are before accepting big orders just like that. Then, okay, the exhibition is over. You have your inquiry forms or you have collected all the business cards. So it's important that you classify them in let's say, more interesting, less interesting. So also set some priorities. Like I said, make sure you know who you're talking to, so you can do yourself or ask some consultant or lawyer to do some background checks or even a detailed due diligence if needed. And then I can only strongly advise, yes, I'm sure you're busy when coming back from an exhibition or after participating in an exhibition. I'm sure you have other things to do as well, but it's extremely important that the companies or the people you have met or you have come to your booth, that if they have any questions, you should answer them very quickly, because in China, people are used to having quick answers. So like I said, they use WeChat more than email. And unfortunately, if they send you a message by WeChat, even in the middle of the night, they expect an answer within a couple of minutes or a few hours. And so this is the way it works in China. If you don't respond quickly, okay, you can take a half day or 2 days, no problem, but at least you need to answer quickly, because if you don't, often they already lose interest. So things go so fast in China. So you really need to make sure to be organized, to answer any questions from potential customers as soon as possible. And of course, ask help from somebody who can speak Chinese. And of course, if you can travel to China, once you have, for example, the exhibition will be held in May, you already should plan a follow-up meeting 2 months later, so that you can meet those most interesting people once again in China. Unfortunately, today, this is still a little bit difficult, but keep it in mind for next year. Okay, we still have 10 to 15 minutes. So before I give the floor to Valentin, I would briefly want to show you some pictures and case studies of projects where I have been involved in the past years. So this is so you will see immediately that most of the pictures I show you are from 2020 and 2021. So this demonstrates that exhibitions have been going on as usual in China. I think already in September or August 2020. So just like 6 months after the COVID outbreak in China, exhibitions started again. So in the past 1.5 years, my colleagues have been participating in, I don't know how many, at least more than 10 different exhibitions in China on behalf of our customers, sometimes with the local distributor and help by our side. So definitely things are going on as usual in China. This is a picture from SIAL in May 2021. And there we were helping a company from Estonia producing cider products. And you see there they have free tasting, but you see this cube there and with the QR code. So in fact, if people scan the QR code, they will go to the WeChat official account of this company. So this is what we prepared in advance. So that means that if they want to taste, they should first scan the QR code, and immediately, of course, we have a number of followers, so that later on after the exhibition, we can send them maybe updated information about our products or keep in touch with them for potential business opportunities. This is a medical exhibition in May 2021. This is a Belgian company producing medical filaments. In fact, you also hear, this is, I think, again, showing the importance of WeChat. You see here on 3 different positions, they have used this QR code on a desktop display on the left, then some banners in the back. It doesn't look nice from a marketing point of view, but I can assure you, if you are walking around in exhibitions in China, you will find these QR codes everywhere. And Chinese people visiting your booth, they will immediately recognize, aha, this is a WeChat official account. And typically, if they scan, they will immediately find information about your company or about your products in Chinese language. So that even if you only have one person there speaking Chinese or not at all, at least they can already see some information about your company in the Chinese language, and then see the samples and scan the products and well, get in touch with you if they're interested. This is a packaging exhibition in June of last year. So again, quite busy. Most of the visitors, of course, Chinese, and all with mouth masks. This is a company making food and non-food packaging machines. And there you see one of my Belgian colleagues based in China. He and another colleague were there to help the company be present at this exhibition. This is another company also in B2B. It's more like a high-tech M-ray measurement system at ITMA in June of last year. So the guys there on the top left, there's one Chinese and one Belgian colleague of mine based in China. So there were just the 2 of them. We did not have the chance to send the whole equipment. So we had just like a small device on the right side there. This was sent by this ATA procedure I mentioned previously. Yeah? So this was sent as a sample, and then after the meeting, after the exhibition finished, we send it back immediately. So although there was no major outcome from this exhibition, at least we've had I think 3 or 4 potentially very interesting leads. So like I said, there was not too many foreign companies there. This was also not a very busy exhibition, but at least even if you only have one big customer from such an exhibition, it's already worthwhile often. Well, it depends on your business and depends on your company. Also, a lot of food companies helping them in the past years. This is at the Food and Hotel China, based in Shanghai, every year in November. So there we've had ice cream and chocolates and Belgian beers, of course, and snacks and candies. There also we've had people, for example, could get 1 scoop of ice cream, but first, before they could get it, they had to scan the QR code. So this is, of course, again, a way to attract new followers and possibly also customers to your company. Yeah? This is a picture from FHC in 2019. Unfortunately, also my last time to China. This was in November 2019. And in the middle there, you see one of my colleagues and 2 Chinese visitors. So we had some samples offered. So each visitor that was interested to participate in the survey, they could get 2 free candies, and then they should fill out a questionnaire, which allowed us indeed to better understand which products would be more suitable for the Chinese market. And it was basically free of charge. We had just some extra space there next to our booth to have this consumer survey, which was indeed a very useful way to understand the market. This is the one I think I showed you before, the CIIE. This is the China Import Exhibition, International Import Exhibition I mentioned to you previously. Like I said, this is one from 2019, was already better than 2018, but I think in the following years, this exhibition may have more and more significance in China. So definitely worthwhile to consider as your first entry in the Chinese market. And finally, this is an example of an exhibition where the Flanders government has been helping companies. So I don't know if you can see it clearly on the picture, but there on the left, you see like a little booth and with some leaflets. So you don't see any products, but just some video and some leaflets. And also, again, a QR code with a WeChat account so that people visiting the booth can look at the products or look at the leaflets and scan the QR code. People from the government were there to introduce the companies between us. I'm not sure if it was really successful. This was in December last year, so very recent. But at least, like I said, at least you have some kind of exposure. And even if it only is very cheap, so I think it was even free of charge for the companies. So even if you have only one interesting lead from this exhibition, I think it's already worthwhile to do it. Okay, so this is, I think, the final slide. I will not go through this in detail because I basically already mentioned it. So if any help you need in the future, both during COVID as well as afterwards, to participate in trade fairs, you can always contact me, and I will definitely be there to help you or to guide you to be successful in China. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bart, first of all, for sharing all this valuable information on the trade fairs in China, both from thoughts to consider before, even thinking about going to a trade fair, to an overview of which trade fairs could be relevant for your organization, depending on your sector, with dates available and all these things. And once you get to the trade fair, some things to keep in mind, and also after the trade fair, what are some follow-ups that could be good to keep in mind, and especially for the Chinese working partners, what is something that could be different from your usual trade fairs back in Europe. So thank you very much. We've already received some questions, but we will save those questions to the end of the session. But once again, just want to remind those of you who are watching that if you do have any questions already now that you know you'd like to ask, you can use the Q&A function here in Zoom, submit them as soon as possible so we can be sure we get to ask your question, and then we'll get back to them later. But once again, thank you very much. We'll go back to you in the Q&A session, because for now we will move on to one thing that you also gave a little bit of a sneak preview to, and that's of course the intellectual property aspect of joining a trade fair in China, which is definitely one of the most important things to keep in mind already before even thinking about going. So to talk more about that, we are happy to have Valentin Delacourt, who is the intellectual property partner at Dale de Wolf. So Valentin, if you would like to share your presentation here and take on the mantle with the intellectual property in mind.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Hear you and see you just fine.
Perfect. Just one thing, I'm not working at Dale de Wolf. I'm working at a firm that is called Osborne Clarke. It's a UK-based network of law firms with a very strong presence in Europe, and we do have an office in China, so we work a lot with China. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Showing on the screen.
So, well, hello everyone. My name is Valentin Delacourt. I'm a Belgian qualified lawyer. I'm in the IP field I've been in the IP field for the last, well, close to 20 years now. I lived and worked in China. I continue to work with China on a daily basis. And I also once in a while work for the China IP SME help desk, for whom I provide trainings on IP in China. Today, we're of course going to talk about how to protect your IP when attending trade fairs. Here is an overview of my presentation. I will start with a few words on context. I think it's very important for you to understand that things have changed a lot over the last years, or over the last decades, and it's important to have a feel of what is going on in terms of IP and innovation when it comes to China. And then in my second part, well, I will focus really on the topic of today, how to protect your IP at trade fairs, and what you need to do before attending trade fairs, when attending a trade fair, and then when you do your following up work after the trade fair. So let's start with a few words on IP in China and on the contexts of intellectual property law in China. Well, the first thing I would like to mention and would like to stress is how much IP has changed over the last decades in China. Important to know that at the end of the 70s, when the country decides to open up to the outside world, well, China was a no man's land in terms of IP. There were no IP laws, no patents, no trademarks, no copyrights, no lawyers, no patent attorneys, nothing. 40 years later, well, China has become a top national priority. I will come back to this, but it's really top of mind of the Chinese government. And so as a result, well, China today is a member of the world is part of the World IP Order. It's a member of the WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization. It's part to all the main IP international treaties and agreements. And so as a result, well, you have a complete set of Chinese IP laws that are in place, and are being adopted on a very regular basis. You have a very strong legislative dynamism when it comes to IP and China, because things are changing so fast in China, and the Chinese legislator pays a lot of attention to adopt the laws to make them fit to the economic and strategic priorities of the country. Second thing you should know is that IP and IP rights are massively used in China. China is the #1 country in the world when it comes to patent and trademark applications. If you look at patents, well, 2015, more than 1 million Chinese invention patents were filed with the Chinese Patent Office. It was the first time that such a high number, that over 1 million patent applications had been filed anywhere in the world. So China made the headlines. And it's a trend that is basically continuing. If you look at 2020, more than 1,400,000 Chinese invention patent applications were filed. Three, well, basically, not only are Chinese companies massively filing at home, as I just mentioned, but they also file abroad more and more. And if you look at PCT applications, you may know what a PCT application is. The PCT system is basically an international way to file patent applications. And China became the #1 PCT applicant in 2019, with the biggest PCT applicant being Huawei, the Chinese telecom giant. So this means that, well, basically Chinese companies are internationalizing. Chinese companies are well aware of the importance of IP when it comes to protect your competitive advantage and when it comes to succeeding on foreign markets. And so, well, they are massively and more filing patents, but it's true also for trademarks abroad. China is a top IP litigation country. It's the most IP litigious country in the world since 2005. If you look at a few numbers, again, more than 16,000 patent litigation cases filed in 2017. If you compare to Belgium, the country where I'm from, we are probably close to 30. I don't have the numbers, but even 30 is probably too much. So this is very interesting. It's not only a number, but it just shows that you have a massive patent litigation activity in China, which means that you do have judges that are very experienced in patent litigation. You have nowadays in China specialized IP courts with judges that have been involved in patent litigation in probably 100, 200, 300 cases. So with a lot of experience, which means that you do have judges with a very good understanding of what a patent is, of what patent litigation is, of the value of IP, and basically these judges render very good decisions. It's not the case all over the country. You do have big differences, so it's important to know and to play with the rules to file your litigation case before an experienced judge. But you can expect to have very good judges in some jurisdictions, in some courts, that will handle your cases fairly and with a lot of competence and expertise. Important to understand is that IP litigation cases are mostly domestic, so they mostly oppose Chinese companies between themselves. Only a fraction of cases involve foreign companies. Again, this shows that Chinese companies do use IP to protect their competitive advantage, and they don't hesitate to use their IP portfolio against their domestic competitors. There is an increase in cases involving foreign businesses, but not as plaintiff as defendants. So more and more foreign companies are the object of IP litigation, where they are attacked by their Chinese competitors that have developed valuable IP portfolios. And again, they don't hesitate to enforce their IP rights against their domestic competitors, but also more and more against their foreign competitors. Interesting also to know is that China is more and more used as a strategic jurisdiction where to litigate between foreign companies. So you very often have, for example, if you take again patent litigation, if you have an important case between multinational companies, very often you will have a case in the US, a case pending in Europe, very often in Germany, and then more and more you have cases pending in China. So I think, again, this is interesting to know because it shows that multinational companies, well, they trust the Chinese system and they don't hesitate to use the Chinese patent litigation system in the context of a broader, wider litigation that it involves other jurisdictions. If the system could not be trusted, they wouldn't risk that. They wouldn't risk to have a bad decision that could be invoked and used and referred to in the US or in Europe. And so I think it's another indication of the fact that if you use the IP system appropriately in China, well, the system can be trusted. 5, the state of innovation. Important to understand, and you probably know that, that China is has become and is today an important innovation center. If you look at R&D spending, well, it has grown massively over the last years, tenfold between 2000 and 2016. China is set to pass US on R&D spending by 2025. Again, this has a direct consequence on intellectual property protection. Why have IP laws been put in place? Well, to protect the results of innovation. IP laws are used by businesses to protect, appropriate the result of their innovation. And so if you massively spend on innovation, you want to have reliable IP laws, a good IP system in place that will protect your investment in innovation. So it's a very important thing to understand. And I'm not the only one saying it. President Xi Jinping himself mentioned that innovation is the first driving force for development, and protecting IPR protects innovation. He mentioned that about a year ago in December 2020. And it's clear from the moment that China has bet on innovation to organize its economy around innovation, well, IP has become absolutely key, and they have worked hard to put in place an efficient IP system. And so IP, as I just mentioned, has become a political imperative. This is very clear if you look at the latest 5-year plan that covers the period of 2021 to 2025. You may have heard about the 14th 5-year plan. Basically, every 5-year, Chinese authorities release such a plan where they define high-level goals to be reached in terms of economic developments, and innovation is at the top of it. China wants to become self-reliant in terms of technology. They want to become global leader in strategic emerging industries. So they are massively investing in that. And as a result, well, they have fully understood that IP is important to achieve these goals. And again, I'm repeating myself, but they have modified their IP system. And nowadays you have a good system in place. Not perfect, of course, but if you know how to use it, it will be a real plus for you. So a few learnings. What can we learn from these facts and figures? Well, the first thing is that the Chinese IP landscape has changed. And as I explained, it has changed for the better. You now have a complete system in place to protect your IP. Second learning, it is possible to protect your IP rights in China. The system is widely used by Chinese companies. It is, of course, accessible to foreign companies. So very important for you as a foreign business to have a good understanding of how the system works and to exploit the system to your advantage. Third, well, it's possible to enforce your IP rights in China. Remember, it's the most IP litigious country in the world. So again, Chinese companies, well, they massively use the IP litigation system. They have several enforcement mechanisms that are available. And so it's important as a foreign businesses to understand how these enforcement mechanisms work. Important to have a strategy to be able to enforce your IP rights if needed, but also to defend yourself, because again, more and more foreign companies are sued in China for IP infringements by their Chinese or their foreign competitors, and you need to be prepared to face that possibility. Last but not least, probably the most important learning is that IP has become essential for Chinese businesses. Chinese businesses are more IP aware, they are more IP rich, they have fully understood that IP is there to protect your competitive advantage, is there to enable you and your business to create value and to grow. And so China's stake as a whole in the IP system has become very important. And there's a clear political will to improve the IP system. As I mentioned, the top of the Chinese government, President Xi Jinping himself, has stressed several occasions how important IP protection was for the country and for the development of the country. And there's also a call from the business to improve the system. And so it's very important to understand that. Any questions, or do we keep the questions at the end? Otherwise, I'm happy to answer a first set of questions now regarding the context of IP protection in China.
Thank you, Valentin. I think we will save the questions until the final part of the presentation.
Okay, perfect. So let's move on to the second part of my presentation on, well, how to protect your IP when you are attending trade fairs in China. Well, basically, the first advice, and my presentation will go around that, is that you need to have a strategy. As I will say and insist on at several occasions, IP protection requires to be proactive. IP protection requires to anticipate, to plan ahead, to have a strategy. And so basically, when it comes to trade fair and IP protection, you need to have a strategy and undertake a set of actions before attending the fair. Hugely important, and Bart has stressed that as well. Any attendance to a trade fair requires some planning, and it's especially true when it comes to IP protection. You need to have a strategy during a trade fair, understand what you should do and what you can do. For example, if you are facing some infringements and countering counterfeits on the booth of several exhibitors. And you need to have a strategy and be aware of what you should do and not do after your attendance at a trade fair. So let's start with what you should do before attending a trade fair. Well, the first step, and this may sound obvious, but it's extremely important. The first thing is that you need to know what your IP rights are. And so it's important to perform an IP audit on the products and on the technologies that you intend to exhibit at the fair. As you know, intellectual property protects intangible assets. Intangible assets, well, they're non-physical, and so they may be tricky and difficult to identify. I think it's especially true when it comes to SMEs. SMEs very often lack an overview of the IP assets of the company, and they don't have a comprehensive overview of the IP assets that cover their products, their technologies that they are planning to exhibit, including in China. And this is a real issue. So it's very important to take the time to ascertain what is protected in your products and technologies, to ascertain the legal status, to understand the territorial coverage, and of course, to make sure that China is covered, to understand the value of the IP rights at stake, and to understand the related risks. This is basically what you do when you do an audit of your IP rights. And doing this will not only benefit your attendance at the trade fair, it's going to benefit your business as a whole, because it's the first step of any IP strategy is to understand what you have. Okay, so very important to understand what is protected in your product and technologies that you intend to exhibit in China, how they are protected, and as a result of this audit, to understand what is not protected and if you should do anything to remedy that. So that's the first step. Second step, once you have analyzed what is protected, well, you need to understand what you should protect and how you should protect that. And here, important to understand that basically your competitive advantage and the result of your innovation can be protected by two main ways, two main types of rights. First of all, intellectual property rights, and then trade secrets. They're not the same thing, and it's important to understand the difference. I will elaborate on this later. But basically, an IP right gives you a monopoly, an exclusive right on the objects of your right. So, well, IP rights are patents, trademarks, copyrights, and designs. Let's take a patent. Well, it protects an invention, a technical solution to a technical problem. So it's there to protect your technical innovations. And if you have a patent granted in China, well, no one will have the right to exploit your invention without your authorization. That's the idea of an IP right. Trade secrets, they function differently. They basically protect your confidential information, your confidential know-how. No monopoly is granted, but trade secrets will protect you against illicit acts. They will protect you against illicit disclosure, access, exploitation of your confidential information. But very important, we'll come back on this, it's important to take proactive measures to protect the confidentiality of your information, of your know-how. So understand how IP works, understand what rights are available to protect your products and technologies that you intend to exhibit, and take action and fill in the gaps if it is possible. Step 3, when you do that, it's very important to create a bundle of rights. You need to understand, as I just mentioned, that you have different types of IP rights and that each IP right serves a different goal. And very often SMEs, well, they focus on one type of IP right. They focus on their trademarks, or they focus on their design, or they focus on their patents, but they lack a comprehensive overview, and they don't make use of all the different IP rights that are available. So very important to understand what IP rights can be used for. Well, trademark law, well, that will protect signs, basically distinctive signs, and they're used to protect the indication of origin of your goods and services. A trademark protects a name, a logo that you use to distinguish yourself from your competitors. Patents, 3 types of patents in China. You have invention patents and utility models. They protect technical features of your products and processes. Then you have design patents that protect external aspects of your products. Can be very useful. Copyright law, they protect creative works. It's a very broad notion. It goes, so copyright can be used to protect your brochures, your logo, your marketing material, but it can also be used to protect your software, your databases, all the preparatory material and documentations in relation to that. So it's a broad subject that can be protected by copyright. And then you have trade secrets, as I mentioned, they protect confidential information and know-how. Again, a very broad scope as well. I will come back to this. And my advice is really to understand how all these rights work and interact, and to create a bundle of rights. And it's very important to understand that the same object can be protected by different types of IP rights. And if you take something as simple as a packaging of biscuits, well, in theory, these are all the elements that could be protected through different types of IP rights. And very important to layer your IP. The more rights you have, the better you will be equipped to face some very challenging situation you may encounter on the Chinese market. Of course, you have a limited budget. Of course, I would never advise a client to go for all these types of protection. You need to be cost effective, but you get my point. Layer your IP, understand what can be protected with different types of IP rights, and use them to your advantage. Step 4, have enforceable IP rights. This is a very important slide. 2 key features, key characteristics of IP rights is, first, an IP right is a territorial right. So it's not because you're protected in Italy or another European country that you're protected in Europe. So you need to anticipate, you need to plan ahead, you need to have an IP strategy and decide where you will apply for protection. And basically the countries that you should protect are those where you trade, those where you manufacture, and those where you exhibit. And so it's very likely that China will be part of these 3 criteria that you should take into account when deciding where to be protected. Second, very important to understand that registration is needed to be protected. IP right protection is not automatic, with the exception of copyrights. So you need to apply for registration, and you need to do that on time. It requires to anticipate, it requires to plan early, and keep in mind that if you don't apply for protection, and if you don't get the resulting protection, well, Not applying in China is like giving a free license to use your inventions, trademarks, copyrights in China to your Chinese and to your foreign competitors on the Chinese market. This is obviously something that you will not want to, so very important to take China into account in your IP strategy. And it's also true if you want to attend a trade fair, of course. Also important to adapt to the specificities of the Chinese IP system. It's not because you're handling your IP in a specific way in Europe or in the US that you should apply and apply the same strategy in China. Principles are more or less harmonized at a global level when it comes to IP, but of course in practice, loads of differences. So very important to be well informed and to work with professionals that understands the way it works in China. Step 5, protect your trade secrets. Trade secrets, I explained it already, it's not per se an IP right. What can be protected? Well, a very broad range of technical, commercial, and operational information. So it can go from technical know-how, technical drawings, product formula, manufacturing processes, production methods, but also a lot of finance and commercial information, cost and price, supplier network, etc., etc. So it's a very broad range of information that can be protected by trade secrets, provided that you can prove 3 conditions. First, the information is secret. Obviously, the object is confidential information. The information must be unknown to the public. The information must have commercial value because it is secret. Right? It can bring you economic benefits. It can bring you a competitive advantage because it is secret. And then third condition, very important, reasonable steps requirement. You need to proactively protect the confidentiality of the information at stake. And this reasonable steps requirement is extremely important. And very often companies do not really understand that or are not aware of the fact that confidential information must be protected. So again, no automatic protection. You need to have a trade secret protection strategy and adopt these reasonable steps. So NDAs, confidentiality markings, selection of the people that can have access to your information, that is really important because it's key to enforce a trade secret. And it's basically the first thing a Chinese judge will check if you want to enforce your trade secrets. So very important to adopt these reasonable steps. And that also applies when you attend a trade fair. Select what information you will disclose or keep secrets. Secret information, only disclose it if the person has signed an NDA. Mark any confidential information as being confidential. All these measures are important and they will be key if you face an illicit use or appropriation of your trade secret and you want to enforce them in China. So tip number 5, adopt reasonable steps before, but also during and after the trade fair. Step 6, prepare enforcement documentation in advance. You may know that in the trade fair, in most trade fairs in China, you have a local IP office. An IP office you can turn to enforce your IP rights on the spot during the trade fair. I will come back to this. It's important that you are aware of this. And in case you want to make use of the IP office of the trade fair you attend, well, you need to have prepared a whole set of documents in advance. And preparing these documents are key because if you don't have them, you won't be able to enforce your rights at the trade fair. And preparing those documents may take time. So it's, again, something that you need to anticipate and you need to plan ahead. And if your documents are not in place, don't complain that the Chinese IP system doesn't work. It's your responsibility. You have to prepare all these documents. Again, it can take time. It can take time because very often you will have to translate them to Chinese. You will need to notarize and legalize them. It can take some days, even weeks sometimes. And basically, you will need to be able to prove that you are the lawful owner of a specific IP right that has been granted in China. And you will also need to have a POA, a power of attorney, in favor of the Chinese lawyer you're using in China to enforce your IP rights, including at the trade fair. And that must be, again, notarized and legalized. So very important to have all these documents in place. I won't go into the details. You will have my slides. But basically, I've listed here for patents, trademarks, copyrights, what types of documents you need to collect, and sometimes translate, legalize, notarize to be able to enforce your IP rights at a trade fair. So a short recap, what do you have to do before attending a trade fair? Well, know your IP, perform an IP audit of the products and technologies that you intend to exhibit, know what you should protect and how, fill in the gaps, create a bundle of rights, again, different IP rights serve different goals, understand that and layer your IP. Step 4, have enforceable IP rights. Step 5, protect your trade secrets. And last but not least, prepare enforcement documentation. Do that in advance. It can take some time. Now, maybe a quick word, and Bart has already given and explained some very valuable information and shared valuable experience about attending trade fairs during COVID times. Of course, as you will understand, this also has an impact on IP protection. Because you will need to share information. You won't be able to go yourself or to send your trusted employees. You have to work with third parties that will represent you at the trade fair. And so there's, of course, a risk of IP leakage, of disclosure of valuable confidential information. So again, you need to anticipate that, have a plan. My key high-level recommendations: select the right partners to represent you. So take the time to find reliable people with whom you are comfortable to work with and that you can trust. So make the relevant background checks, collect information on these people. Second, good training is critical. Of course, you need to train them to enable them to present and sell your products and technologies on the fair, but don't forget your IP and trade secret protection. These guys need to understand what they can disclose, what they cannot disclose, and they need to understand also what is protected in your products and technologies. So very important to include that also in your trainings. Protect your trade secrets. So sign enforceable NDAs with the person with whom you will work that will represent you at trade fairs, and adopt any other types of reasonable steps, including marking as confidential any confidential information you share with them, and have strong contracts in place. So you need to have good contracts with the people that will represent you at the trade fairs. And of course, you need to pay attention to the IP and confidentiality provisions in those contracts. So that's it for what you should do before attending the fair. Now, what is important to know and what types of action do you need to take when attending trade fairs in order to protect your IP? Well, the first thing that is important is that you should only disclose during a trade fair what is needed to disclose to present and sell your products and technologies. So the first question to ask yourself is, well, how much of my IP should I disclose? So, and with this in mind, you really should review all the materials that you intend to display, that you intend to distribute. Why is that? Well, a typical example: you have been working on a new product, you want to send a sample and present it already to the markets, you haven't filed your patents yet, you present the product and technology, you disclose the invention you intend to patent. Well, too bad for you, this is a disclosure, which means the invention is not new anymore, which means that you cannot obtain a patent anymore on that. Same for designs. So avoid novelty destroying publications, which often happen at trade fairs. Very important to be aware of that. And again, train the people that represent you at the fair so that they don't make these kind of novelty destroying publications. Of course, be aware of the risks associated with trade secret disclosure and misappropriation. I've elaborated on that. already, but be aware of that in selecting what you will display, what you will exhibit, what you will disclose during a trade fair. Step 2, notify visitors about your IP rights. That's very important if you have built an IP portfolio, you have your strategy in place, you have followed all the steps I've mentioned. Well, inform the public of the fact that you have an IP strategy, of the fact that some material is protected by copyright, that you have applied for or registered your trademarks, that you have a patent pending or a patent granted for a specific invention that is implemented in your products and technologies. Inform the public by marking information as confidential if you share confidential information. This is very important to build awareness and to deliver the message that you know what IP is, that you have a strategy, and that, well, you have the potential to enforce your IP rights in case they are counterfeited, infringed. So this is a prevention measure, this is an informational measure, but it's very important. Step 3, identify counterfeiters. Trade fairs are basically an amazing opportunity to see if your products are being copied, if counterfeits are exhibited on the market. It's a good opportunity to discover and catch counterfeiters. So, well, the thing that you could do before attending a fair is checking the list of the exhibitor, try to identify potential counterfeiters, make a background check if you can already collect some information online, and then coordinate with your local team, your Chinese distributor, if you have any, and already organize a possible enforcement on the spot. So make sure to have a lawyer, etc., etc. During the trade fair, well, send your people research the exhibitor stand if they spot counterfeits. This is something that can deliver good results. Approach then the counterfeiters undercover and collect evidence, collect samples of the counterfeited products, make pictures, obtain name cards, basically collect evidence. Because basically when you attend a trade fair in terms of IP, you have, and you're facing some counterfeits, you have two main options. The first one is to enforce your IP on the spot through the local IP office. The second one is collecting evidence for a later action. So let's start with this second option. It's very often more sensible to secure reliable evidence at a trade fair than to enforce your IP rights on the spot. Basically, why is that? Well, because it can prove difficult to enforce your IP rights on the spot, because the action will be limited to the company that is exhibiting, while if you collect evidence that can be used later in a civil proceeding or criminal proceeding, well, the result of your action may be, the impact of your enforcement action can be much bigger. And it's important to know that filing litigation and IP litigation in China requires to have strong evidence. Evidence is basically everything when it comes to litigating in China. And China has very stringent and very tough rules in terms of admissibility of evidence. It's not so easy. You need to respect a formalism that is very important. And well, very often the trade fair, you have the time, you act undercover, you collect the whole information you have to, you follow the rules, and then in a second step, after the trade fair is finished, you can file your litigation with a good impact. Important to know is that in China, you need to have notarized evidence of the infringement. This has strong probative force. And so very often, again, you need to organize that in advance, but have a Chinese lawyer, a Chinese notary public that will go on the spot, visit the booth of the infringer, take picture, and put all of this in a notarized report. And this will have strong probative force when you litigate in front of a Chinese court. Another advantage of collecting evidence at the trade fair is that you can play with the jurisdiction rules, you can do some forum shopping and file the action in the jurisdiction of the trade fair, which is often out of the sphere of influence of a possible counterfeiter. So that's an additional benefit of securing and collecting valid evidence of infringement during a trade fair. That's option one. Option two is, as I mentioned already, enforce your IP at fairs. You can go to the local IP office. They can take different types of actions. They can mediate and try to find a solution. They can order the removal of infringing material, of have the material covered that you cannot see it anymore. For example, an infringing trademark that would be covered, that cannot be seen by the public. They can seize sample, and they can forward the case to some agencies for administrative enforcement. Of course, as I mentioned, I will not detail that again, but very important to have all your documents in place. I refer to what I said, to all the actions you need to undertake before attending the fair. And well, basically enforcing your IP at trade fairs can deliver positive results, but can also be pretty tough. And I can share very quickly two experiences I had. One, I was representing a German car maker that had a license agreement for glasses with a Chinese licensee. The Chinese licensee had no right anymore to use the trademark of this German car maker. And a German car maker realized that they attended the trade fair in Shanghai, exhibiting its trademark. And so we had to go there, and on the spot, we could convince the local IP office to enforce the rights of the client, and everything was basically removed and covered on the booth of the Chinese licensee. So very easy and immediate positive result of IP enforcement at a trade fair. Another experience I had was for a Belgian SME medical device producer. They were aware of a counterfeiter. They were aware that he would attend a trade fair. We tried to enforce the rights there, and it became very tough. The IP office was very reluctant to act, and the Chinese counterfeiter was extremely aggressive. The lawyer got beaten up, and he started, the counterfeiter started to invoke his connections with police, the government, and make a whole scene. And basically the results were absolutely not good, and we didn't manage to enforce the IP rights of the client, and the lawyer got beaten up. So this is something that also can happen in China. So that's it for what you should do during a trade fair. Now, very quickly, because I'm out of time, protecting your IP when following up on the trade fair. Well, basically select your leads. Always work with the relevant people. Don't trust anyone. Make background checks, and decide to work with people that can be trusted and are reliable. Organize what you share. Absolutely critical. It's true when you prepare and on your booth, decide what you exhibit. Very important also when you follow up. Don't share everything with anyone, and sign NDAs, of course. Implement reasonable steps to protect the confidentiality of the information that you share. So that's it. To conclude, how to protect your IP assets at trade fair. Well, remember that the IP and innovation landscape in China has changed. It has changed for the better. Important to plan ahead, to have a strategy, be proactive and anticipate. During the fair, exploit all the opportunities that are offered, collect evidence of infringement or enforce on the spot, but select that last option only if you have a very strong case. And then have, of course, a strategy to follow up. Here is a recap of my recommendations, and I'm very happy to answer questions with Bart, if any. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valentin, for just like Bart, giving a very valuable insight into, well, this time the intellectual property aspect of participating in trade fairs in China. I think because we have these 10 minutes left for the Q&A, we will jump straight into it. But just very briefly, if you're watching and you have a question, don't forget to submit your question in the Q&A function here in Zoom, and we will see if we can get around to it in time. So the first question is actually one that was written in the chat earlier, asking if it's possible through the EU SME Center to participate in trade fairs in China. I think to that I can answer very briefly, just saying that sometimes throughout, especially 2021, the EU SME Center has organized booths and delegations at trade fairs in China. Especially we did it for the trade-in fairs, trade fair in Beijing, which is the equivalent in a way to CIIE in Beijing. So that is possible, but right now and until the end of phase 3, which concludes in March, we have nothing planned right now, also because the Olympics are coming and it can be hard to plan in that time. The second question is another technical one, which I will answer very briefly. The question is it possible to share the slides? Thanks in advance. Yes, we will share the slides to all participants after today's event has concluded, so we will send it to your emails. Now, the third question goes back to today's two speakers. So that question is perhaps mainly at the Bart here. So the question reads, where to find a distributor in China for selling your products in the Chinese market? Where to find a distributor in China?
Yes, I think the first way is indeed to ask advice and help from any government association. It can be your country's association or Chamber of Commerce or any other agency. Then, of course, the EU SME Center can definitely also help you. There's a lot of databases, a lot of sources also in Chinese websites to find contact information of potential partners or distributors. Problem is, of course, how to connect with them. And that is has become more difficult now, of course, due to COVID. Also, due to the fact simply that if you have a list of potential contacts and you send them emails, the success rate is very, very low from my experience. Because, well, first of all, probably we will send the email in English. Then secondly, like I said, often they don't even read their emails anymore. So you need to find a way to contact them. And thirdly, of course, like I said before, if somebody can introduce you, this relationship, this Guanxi culture, you're much, much stronger if you can be connected through some other link or relationship to find the right, not only the right distributor, but also the right person inside this organization. Because of course, often due to this hierarchical levels, you need to find the right person. So to answer your question, I think you need to find somebody who can communicate in Chinese. I'm sure you know somebody or in your organization, or you know somebody in China. Or then, of course, indeed, going to exhibitions, even if you cannot go there, you can send other people to go there and then find some contacts there. And indeed, try to have a personal face-to-face meeting with them and introduce your company and then do some background checks. So it's not easy. It's a trial and error situation. Of course, you can also have some paid services like consultants like me. But generally speaking, I think there's a lot of things you can do by yourself if you have some perseverance.
Thank you, Bart, for that question. We will jump for that answer, I should say. We will jump straight over to the second question, which is directed to Valentin. And that question reads, what role can the World Intellectual Property Organization play to protect IP?
What role can it play? Well, it's basically you know, an international organization. They won't play a role to protect your IP, except that a few systems depend from them, like the PCT, like the Madrid system for registering trademarks. I'm not sure I understand the question. If you want to enforce your rights or protect them, you don't have to turn to the World Intellectual Property Organization, where countries basically join them, and there are loads of initiatives and very positive initiatives, but this is more at a policy making level than at the well, concrete IP protection level of your business.
Thank you for that. And there's actually a follow-up question here also about IP rights that's a little bit more specific to trade fairs. So the question is typical mistakes that you see in regards to trade fairs and intellectual property rights.
Well, it's basically a bit the subject of my presentation. The most typical mistake is people are not prepared. They just send their products. They have no strategy, no documentation in place, no IP rights strategy. So they're not even protected in China. They don't even understand what they have to protect, or they are partially protected but not well enough. They don't work with the people they should. These are the typical mistakes, I think. And loads of the tips I've given, especially for everything you should do before attending a trade fair, they're important not only for attending a trade fair, they're important for your business. They are key parts of any IP strategy that you should put in place if you want to exploit the IP mechanisms and the IP rights that exist to protect your business, to your competitive advantage, to help you protect the value of what you have developed. So yeah, I think the biggest mistake is being a bit naive and don't really have a strategy, and then go to China or anywhere else, by the way, without knowing what you do and what you should do. So it's really a question of awareness, and then being convinced that you need to dedicate some people, some money to define, implement, enforce your strategy.
Thank you, Valentin. I think also since the time is running, I think I would like to ask both of you one question that would kind of be talking about trade fairs in China, whether or not it's the whole process from the beginning to the act of the trade fair to afterwards, or whether or not it's more specific to the IP protection aspect of it. We're talking about opportunities and benefits sometimes. So could you give one do and one don't for participating in trade fairs in China? And perhaps we could start with Bart.
Well, so it's a surprise question. Well, of course, I think I mentioned most of what I wanted to say during my presentation. So basically, I think if I say do, I would say definitely try to find a way to represent your company on one of the most important exhibitions for your sector or for your company in China. Like I said, many of your competitors may not wish to do it because they think, oh, it's too difficult or too complicated or whatever. So I think it's an opportunity for you to have additional exposure. So definitely do consider to go there. And then don't do it just for fun or just on the side. I think nothing works in China if you're not committed. So you need to have this well-balanced plan to prepare and also follow up afterwards. I think that's the two most important suggestions.
Thank you, Bart. And if we could ask the same to you, Valentin, one do and one don't in regards to intellectual property rights and trade fairs in China.
Yeah, okay, I'll be very high level. My do would be have a strategy, which means being proactive and which means trusting and undertaking the time to understand the system. That's my do. My don't is don't be reluctant to invest in your IP protection. If you perceive this as being a cost, if you don't understand the immediate benefits that you can take out of your IP strategy and what it will require in terms of investments, money and people, don't go to China. You don't have your place there, and your Chinese experience will be a disaster.
Thank you for that as well, Valentin. We have just received one extra question, which is also in regards to intellectual property. So I think we will take that one, and then that will be the last question for today, as time is actually up. The question reads, where is it possible to register trade secrets now that the World Intellectual Property Organization is closing down its WIPO-proof registration system.
Yeah, so basically,
technical...
trade secrets are not registered as such. The WIPO-proof was a mechanism to give a date to some contents. I was very surprised to see that they were closing this down. I think that the motives are they don't want to interfere and take business from private companies. You do have alternatives by private companies, or for example, in the Benelux, we have the Benelux IP office offers an equivalent to the WIPO-proof. It's called eDepot. It's cheap, it's easy to use. It gives you a date of creation, and it can help you date some content. And it's very recommended to be used. So thank you for bringing this up. Yeah, that would be my answer.
Thank you. Then that will be the last question. And I think I'll just wrap it all up here in the end by saying, first of all, thank you to today's two expert speakers, Bart and Valentin, very much for sharing very insightful knowledge on the whole process of trade fairs in China, especially during COVID times. How has that impacted? And also especially the intellectual property. So thank you very much for those presentations. And thank you to everyone who's been watching today as well, regardless of whether or not you're tuning in from somewhere in Europe, somewhere in China, or perhaps somewhere third. Also, thank you very much for tuning in today. We hope we will see you for our future events. So from both the EU SME Center side, and I also want to say from the AICE, the Italian Association of Foreign Trade, thank you to David Daninotti and the team there as well. So do stay tuned with all of the organizations, and we hope to see you at the future events in the future. So have a good day, everyone, and see you next time.